Hey everyone, Tina Hogan Grant here with my Cuppa A Natter that I like to do on a Monday, twice a month. I like to bring authors into my home and we talk about books, writing, life as an author, and whatever comes to mind. And tonight I have best-selling author Hannah Mary McKinnon. How are you, my dear?
I'm very well. Thank you again for inviting me back. I'm so thrilled.
Oh, I am so happy to have you. I had such a good time talking to you. It's been just over a year that we last chatted.
Yeah,
Can you believe it's gone by that quick?
No.
It's unbelievable. And in that time, you have had a release. But before we get into that, for those that didn't watch our last show, can you just give us a little background on you, where you live? I know we all know you're British. I love your accent. I have to say that, being British myself.
Thank you.
But just give us a little background on Hannah.
Sure. So I was born in the UK, but I grew up in Switzerland. That's where I spent most of my life thus far. And I moved to Canada in 2010. I live in Oakville, which is just outside of Toronto, west of Toronto a little bit. My writing career started in 2016 when my first book released. Before that, I worked in IT recruitment for 15 years and in high-tech industries before that. So writing is actually my second career. And I'm loving it very much. I live as I mentioned, in Canada, and I have 3 teenage sons, one that just turned 19 and 2 who will be 18 in December. So when I'm not writing, I try and keep up with feeding them because they eat a lot.
You're the only female.
I am heavily outnumbered. Yes.
Oh, wow. I hope you have more than one bathroom.
Yes, we do.
I can imagine sharing a bathroom with 4 males.
Yes, but they're lovely lads, and they've always got my back. So I really can't complain. They're great guys, all of them.
That's fantastic. And congratulations. Last time we talked, you were talking about this book that is now out. It is called Never Coming Home. Now, there it is. I love the cover.
Thank you.
Do you have a say in your covers with your publisher?
Well, a say. They send me. Yeah. Do you like it? Or no? No, that's not fair. All joking aside, they do ask me. I remember with this one in particular, it was a little bit of an odd situation because my original pitch title, and I'm not attached to my titles because the marketing department always comes up with far better ones than I do. So that's fine. I just call it book 9 or something equally as boring. But for this one, I had originally called it Never Coming Home, and I really liked the title. And my editor said, I don't know, it sounds a bit generic. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll change it. And then we actually settled on An Honest Man, which I really liked because Lucas in the story is not honest at all. So it's a little bit tongue in cheek, which is the way he is. So they were trying to design a cover, but it wasn't clicking. It wasn't working. They just found if they had a guy on the cover, it made it just look a bit too sinister or maybe like romantic suspense, which it isn't. It's a thriller. And so my editor came back and she said, we're struggling with the title and to find a cover that will match. So how do you feel if we change the title? I said, that's fine. What do you think of Never Coming Home? That was the one I initially floated, but you weren't sure. And she said, actually, I really like it now. So she took it to the sales department. They really liked the cover, the title. And then the cover design went from there. So they went through a couple of iterations before we landed on this blue.
Great.
It doesn't really pop on the screen, but it does in real life. It really pops with the yellow and the blue.
Yeah, I like the colors, and it looks intriguing. It does. And I read the blurb. I want to get into that with you in a minute, but this is a standalone, correct?
Yes.
And what genre would you classify it as?
I'd say it's domestic suspense, crime fiction, but the subgenre would be thriller, domestic suspense.
Okay. And how many books have you written now since 2016?
This is my 6th.
Wow. So pretty much 1 book a year.
Yes.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. I read I read the blurb of this book, and I am thrilled that, like about 20 minutes or so, you're going to actually give us a live read, an excerpt of the book, which I'm excited to hear about. Now, when I was reading the blurb, I was really intrigued because, and I'm going to say this, is because when I normally pick up a suspense murder mystery book, thriller book, I'm expecting it to be a murder, and you're going to try and find out who the killer is.
Yes.
That's kind of what I expect.
Yes.
Now, in the blurb, you tell us all that. You tell us about the murder. You tell us who killed the person. And that really took me by surprise. I'm like, wow, we already know who killed the person in the book. So I'm assuming that the suspense part or the mystery part happens after all that.
Yes. So Never Coming Home it's different from all of mine. I'm so pleased you're intrigued. It's different from my other books because, well, a number of reasons. One, it's written from the antagonist's point of view, from the bad guy's point of view. So you're in Lucas's head, and he said he admits very openly, it's on the back, as you mentioned, that he has had his wife killed. He hired a hitman on the dark web to kill his very, very, very rich, but very, very, very annoying wife because he wants her money. So he's very rational. He rationalizes everything as to why he's done this. And he has multiple reasons, not just that she's annoying, but other reasons too, why he wanted her money. And he's basically playing the grieving husband to perfection and waiting to cash the check. So the question is he going to get away with this, with his evil deeds? Because a month after, and this is no spoiler alert, a month after his wife's disappearance, we'll call it that, because he knows she's dead, he receives a cryptic note with a cryptic photograph in his pack of flyers on his doorstep because somebody knows what he did. So now the question becomes, is he going to get away with it? And who knows what? And what are they going to do next? Because they start messing with him. So
I love how you put a twist in this. It's not your normal thriller. I just like that twist. And that really, created my intrigue to read this book. I'm really inspired by it. I got to ask, what inspired this story?
It was movies, actually, because I really love movies and TV shows where you root for the bad guy, or woman, even though you shouldn't. I find that so intriguing. Why is it that people were rooting for Walter White, I think his name was, in Breaking Bad? Or why is it that we feel sometimes that maybe the Joker should get away with stuff in Batman? Why is that? What do writers and creators of these characters do to make us sympathize, empathize, and root for the bad woman or man? And I wondered if I could do that. So Lucas, although he's a bad guy, he's not completely off the charts mad. He has his reasons. He cares very deeply for his dad. He cares very deeply for his dog, Roger, who incidentally his wife wanted to have taken to the impound. So, right, exactly. So he's, if you met Lucas at a dinner party, he would charm you and he would never do anything to you to hurt you, providing you don't have something he wants. So providing you're not in his way. Otherwise, you'd have a very lovely encounter. He'd be a wonderful, splendid guest at a dinner party. He's very well read. He's very educated. It's all a big facade, of course, because he comes from a very poor background. But I found him a really intriguing character to write. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, because I wrote the book, he's funny.
He's funny?
He's funny. He's very wry. He's got a very, very funny sense of humor. So I gave him hopefully what people will like if they like my sense of humor, because it's very much my sense of humor. They'll find him funny, which makes him endearing again. So hopefully.
Right. Now, when you say he's funny and you started writing this book, are you a plotter? Or are you a pantser when you write your books? Do you plot your books out?
I plot. Yes, I plot.
So when you were plotting this book, I'm sorry, what is the name of the husband again in the book?
Lucas.
Lucas, you said he's a funny guy. Did you
Yes.
plot that, or did that just kind of unfolded while you were writing?
So as I was plotting, as I was developing his character, I thought, okay, it's a really big ask to extend my hand to readers and say, come with me on this journey. Come on Lucas's journey. By the way, he's a bad guy and he's had his wife killed via hitman on the dark web. But
you can't help that.
So I knew it was a big ask. So I needed to give him character traits that people would want to go on this journey with him. One of them was making him endearing, giving him a background, having people understand why he's done the things he's done and where he's come from was really important. Because he's not just a bad guy to be a bad guy. He's not a cartoon character. You know, I didn't want him to be cartoonish. But I also thought, okay, if someone's funny, you're perhaps a little bit more forgiving. And I also needed lightness in the book. I couldn't just have it be this guy's had his wife killed by a hitman, beginning, middle, end, and not. But there needed to be some light relief, you know, from the moments of tension.
And the wife you made annoying and wanted to put the dog down. So there you go.
I mean, she doesn't, you know, she didn't deserve to be killed, but she
Anyone
is.
that touches a dog or threatens to go to the pound, then
Exactly. So I was very, very conscious as I was plotting the book that I needed to make sure that if the reader came with me on this journey, that I wouldn't suddenly look left and right and go, oh no, there's nobody here with me anymore. They've all left, you know? So that was why. So it was a very conscious decision.
I'm very intrigued. I do want to pause for 1 minute. We have a lot of people joining us, and I just want to say a howdy to some of them. Again, I'm talking with bestselling author Hannah Mary McKinnon. If you have any questions for Hannah, go ahead and put them in the comments. And I would try to get to as many as I can. And Hannah, if you see one that, you know, pops out, let me know and we'll put it up on the screen. But we've got Karen Wright is here. B is here. Tina Atkinson, Duanne Fox, Diane Wright, Bambi, Karen Geerling. Let me see. Lori Chasco, Vicky Fassetti.
Wow.
All saying hello. Carol Santoro Hyde. Let me see. Alicia Henry, Elaine Sapp. All here. Let's hear about your books. B does have a question. I'm going to pop some up as I see them so I can get as many as I can. B's asking, when you're writing, is that when the title comes to you, or do you try for the title, then write up with that?
I don't know about you, Tina, but I am rubbish with titles. I am so bad. And so Never Coming Home is the only one of my titles that suggested titles that has ever stuck. And that was after saying no and then changing it back to that. So it's a bit of a running joke in house, you know, with a publisher that I'll just call it book 8 or whatever, you know, I'll just call it WIP, you know, work in progress.
There you go. Or book 1, 2, 3, like you said.
Exactly. And occasionally I'll come up with a name and I'll think, yes, this is great. So last year for You Will Remember Me, I thought, oh gosh, what was it going to be? A Stranger Within. That's what I thought, which really fit because the character has amnesia and it's really. And Lisa Unger brought out a book called The Stranger Inside, I think. So my publisher said, nope, not happening. Same publisher as well. So, I've never had a title for one of my books that has just popped out and then I've written from that. How about you? Does that happen to you? Have you had a title that you've then built?
No, a lot of times, well, with the Sabella series, it was easy because it was a series. And each character was getting their own book.
Yes.
The book was named after the character.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect. There we go. But as it's getting more into the books, like book 6 and book 7, now it's the story about all of them together. And now that each character's had their own book, then I started to struggle with titles.
Yes.
That's when I started to struggle. And then with my trilogy, the titles kind of came in the middle of the book. Kind of
Ah,
came in the middle of the book.
yeah.
And there's a sentence I wrote, and part of that sentence was the title. It
Isn't
just,
that neat though? When
I
I
love
love that when you read a book and then you
it.
see part of a sentence, you go, "Ah, that's where the
That's
title
where the
came
title
from."
comes from.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to ask you this question. I was so intrigued with your blurb. I really was. It was really well written. It got my interest. For me, I'm not sure if you have to, but I write my own blurbs. I'm
I
not sure.
don't.
You're lucky.
I am lucky.
That for me is the hardest part. I, it's one I put off and I put off and I put off, and then all of a sudden my cover designer was like, "Tina, I'm still waiting for that blurb. We have
Yeah.
like 2 weeks before I start working on this." I'm like, "Oh God, okay," and I'll spend a whole day.
Yes.
And I write it by hand. I don't do it on the computer because I scratch it out.
Yeah.
So there's like paper all over the floor. And the last blurb I had to write, it was really weird because I spent all day and I wasn't happy with it. I just was not happy with it. And then I walked away for like 20 minutes. I came back and I wrote a completely different version, totally different from a different angle, wrote it in 30 minutes and I loved it. And I'm
Wow.
like, why couldn't I have written this 8 hours ago? You know?
Because you needed all the other practice runs for.
But for me, it's the hardest part. You got to condense an 80,000, word manuscript into 250 words
Yes.
without giving a lot of. And that's what's surprising with yours. I'm like, she's already telling us who's killed who, and okay, the mystery's after all this. And then I read more of the blurb. I'm like, very
Yes,
clever.
that's right. Well, I'm fortunate that my editor, they always write the blurb, so thankfully, and we work on it. She'll write it and then send it, and then we'll play around with it a little bit. But you're right, it's so hard to just, especially because we know everything about the book, to try and not give too many clues, but to still leave a hook that's juicy enough for people.
You need a hook, and it's also your pitch. This is your stage.
Yeah.
This is your pitch.
Yes.
When I go into a physical bookstore, I pick up, if a book, the cover, number one, is what's going to entice me to pick it up. For me, a lot of people say don't judge a book by a cover. I'm sorry, but the cover draws me in. I do too. And then the next thing I do is I flip it over.
Yes.
And I'll start reading the blurb. Now I'm either going to read that blurb to the end because I'm intrigued, or the couple of paragraphs in, it's not, grab me and I'll put it down. But if I get to the end of that, blurb, I'm inside the book before I buy it, and I'm checking out that first chapter.
Yes, same.
That's kind of my steps to buy the book.
I do the same. The same.
That blurb is really your sales pitch. Besides and the book. I saw a question here that I wanted to put up. It is from Karen. She says, "Do you use family and friends as characters?"
No, I think the more there's only a certain amount, a well that's this big that you can draw from, and then you run out of people. So no, I might use little things. I remember in one of my books I had a principal, and I combined 2 principals from my kids' school into one. And I remember my son read it and he said, "Oh, is that Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so?" And he rolled into one. Yes, it is.
He picked up on it.
He did, yeah, because he remembered them both. So generally not. I mean, occasionally I've had somebody who has helped me, and in return for being a character in the book, but even then they're not the person that I know. They have their name and they might have the same job.
Right.
But then it becomes the character. So I tend not to do that. It's our job to make stuff up. So I tend not
fiction.
to.
Yeah, you want to make it fiction. I like that your boys read your books. Do they read all of them?
So not all of them. So one of them, our eldest one hasn't read any of them. He says it's, quote, weird
to read mum's books.
But there's no sex in them. It doesn't matter. It's weird. Well, actually, there is some sex in them. I could mark the pages for him. But I said in the last one, there's no sex and never coming out. No, it's weird. Okay. And then I have one of the twins who's read a couple, and then the second twin who's read them all. And
nice.
Yeah, and he was so sweet because he read Never Coming Home, and he said that it was the best book he'd ever read, which was high praise from a 17-and-a-half-year-old indeed. So
what a fabulous compliment.
yeah, I was
Now,
really touched.
is he a big reader other than reading your books? He reads
Yes, he does. He's quite the bookworm, as is the oldest one too, but just not mine.
He reads them well. I love that. Here's a question for you from Alicia. She says, who has been your hardest character to write about and why?
Oh my word, my heart. Okay, yeah, actually that's a straightforward question. That would be the man from the beach in You Will Remember Me, last year's book. And the reason why is because he has amnesia, but he's also a point of view character. And I think we chatted about this last year. I completely underestimated how hard it is to write a point of view character who cannot have a flashback or a single memory. It was only when I started writing him that I realized how much as authors we give them thoughts about stuff that has happened in the past or about themselves, indeed, the way they view the world. And I couldn't do that. I could only do that looking forward for the man from the beach, not looking backward, which was really, really challenging.
And did this occur to you once you started writing?
Yeah, once we pitched it,
the whole book and pitched it, then
I was all in at that point. I had to write the damn thing.
Yeah, you're committed.
Yeah, it was difficult.
I wouldn't have thought about that either until you started writing.
And it seems so. Now that looking back, I think, well, why didn't I think about that? And I just didn't. I don't know why.
Until you started writing, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I have yet to read that book, but I'm sure you did a fabulous job. The feedbacks on your book are fabulous.
Thank you.
So I'm sure it's a brilliant book.
Thank you.
Here's a question for you from Karen. She's asking, how do you come up with your characters' names?
I use baby naming websites.
Like me, I'm the same way.
You do the same? And then I write them down in alphabetical order and try and make sure I don't have too many or any with the same first letter. Or if they are, to have them quite different. So
what I also do too is I try and have a name that I can pronounce.
Yes.
If I can't pronounce it, how am I expecting my readers to pronounce? It might sound good and look good.
Agreed.
But if I can't pronounce it, then I'm not using it. Because I will read a book. The book's great. The story's great. But the character's name I have trouble with. A few pages in, she's now called Mary. I just give her my own name.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I try and do the same to keep names that and names that work together as well if they're multiple characters and not have, say, a Lily and a Liliana, and because that just gets confusing. And having said that, in the book for next year, the line editor came back with feedback and said, there's lots and lots of names with M. I thought, I thought I did this, but it was the secondary characters that I hadn't really thought about. Yeah. So I went back and thank goodness you can do the Control H in Word and then replace. So I got rid of a few and changed them because I hadn't paid attention.
Where does this book take place?
Never Coming Home is in Boston and the UK, actually. So chapters set in the past, or I should say scenes set in the past would be in England, and then the vast majority is in Boston.
Do you look at still on the subject of names, but depending on where your book takes place, do you look at popular names for that state or that area, or
no? Not necessarily. I'll look at birth years, what names were popular that year, and start there really. And then sometimes I change them partway through where it just doesn't fit the character.
Yeah, I find sometimes the personality of somebody.
Yes.
And you find later on as a personality develops, like, well, a child would never say this, or a child would never do this. And
yes, because we get to know the characters as we write them, don't we? And then sometimes we think, she's not a Victoria. Or she is a Victoria. Yeah.
Now, Karen asked you, I think it was Karen. No, it's Alicia, about your hardest character to write. Now, how about a favorite character?
Lucas is Never Coming Home. Yeah. It was so much fun to write from the villain's perspective. And it was because, you know, when in my other books, something has happened and someone's trying to figure out what's going on, and they might have, and so does Lucas, to be fair. I mean, someone's messing with him, but he has a different mindset because he wants to get away with murder. He's not trying to solve a murder. He wants to get away with it. So it was just very, he could be very direct, and I find amusing in just the way he sees things and the way he rationalizes what he's done or what's happening. And of course, he can't go to the cops and ask for help because he's a murderer. So
right, exactly.
So door closed.
And now I want to get away with it. I just like the way you built it up to that. I just like that twist. That really, really grabbed me. Linda has a question for you. She says, "Did you ever have anything published before your first book?"
A couple of short stories, yes. I know half a dozen or so, maybe more. But not my, oh no, hang on a minute. Yeah, a few short stories, not very many. And actually I wrote the short stories after I'd written the manuscript. So I started not necessarily the way not let me approach it, you know, I think I'll just, cut my teeth on an entire novel. Why not? So I wrote the novel first, and it was as I was editing it and taking workshops and stuff, writing workshops, that I wrote short stories and saw those published on various websites and in one anthology, I think, before the book was published.
Wow. And one more from Lori Chasko. "Did you write for your school paper, or just like English class that sparked your writing interest?"
So that's a great question. We didn't have a school paper in any of the schools I was at, so be no to that one. I actually only attended school in England for 3 years because we moved to Switzerland when I was 1. We moved back to England when I was 8. We moved back to Switzerland when I was 11. So from the age of 8 to 11, I attended school in English, but all of my other studies, so elementary, secondary and post-secondary, were either in German or French. So I never actually took English literature, which is quite funny considering what I do for a living now.
I know, right?
Yeah. So I used to love writing essays in school, and creative writing. I mean, essays too. Yeah, sure, they were fine, but it was when I get the biggest kick was when the teacher would just write a word on the blackboard and say, "Write something about that." And I just
single word prompt.
Yeah, just a single word prompt, whatever we wanted. And I loved that. But then, I left school. I worked, I studied, I studied again. And then I had this big career, and creative writing wasn't on my horizon until we came to Canada. So it just lay dormant, I guess, I think probably for 30 years until I started writing creatively again, which is...
And I know you worked in the corporate field for many years. Mm-hmm. So what sparked this interest to write after 30 years?
Failure. My second career was born from failure. So what happened was, my husband's Canadian. That's the Canadian connection. And when we met, I was living in Switzerland. He was living in Canada. He moved over to Switzerland, and we stayed there for 11 years. I forged my career. We had 3 boys. He was a stay-at-home dad for 7 years. And then we decided that for a better work-life balance, we would come to Canada, because it was really tricky where we were with the school. It's not like here where kids go to school, start at 9 and finish at 4. They would come home at lunchtime. They'd start at different times. They might or might not have school in the afternoon. And he couldn't see getting back into his career. And I never saw the kids or my husband, actually, because I traveled and worked a lot. So we thought, okay, let's try something else. Let's flip this on its head. I was going to start my own business in Canada, which I did, only to see it fail miserably within its first year. And I felt very sorry for myself. I didn't know what to do. I'd pushed this big corporate career basically off a cliff. Didn't have any connections here. Didn't know what to do. Didn't know if I wanted to go corporate again, because if I did, I'd be commuting longer than I was before. I'd see the kids even less and might as well have stayed in Switzerland. And what's the point? So I remember Rob saying to me, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I said, you know what? If I had a second career, I think I'd like to write books. And he said, well, why don't you do that then? And so I did.
Wow.
It wasn't quite that simple. And there was a lot of failure and a lot of rejection. You know, it took me a couple of years.
That's part of the journey.
It is.
That's
But
part of the
that's
journey.
why. Yeah, it really was. If we hadn't come, I really believe if we hadn't come to Canada, if we'd stayed in Switzerland and I'd stayed with my corporate career, I don't think I'd be writing, because I wouldn't have had the time.
And look at you now, best-selling author, international too.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Perseverance pays off. It really does.
Persevere. One of my writing teachers once said, to get published, you need 3 things. You need a great manuscript, or a good manuscript, perseverance, and luck. And most of the time, 2 out of the 3 will do. So I know for me, I had an okay manuscript. It wasn't great, and I don't think it was good, but I persevered and I was lucky at meeting my agent, right place, right time situation. So yeah.
You did brilliant. And now we're going to get a treat because you're going to do a live read.
I am.
I'm going to hand it over to you. You can tell us what you're going to read, and we will listen.
So I am going to read the first chapter of Never Coming Home, which published on May 24th, I think it was. So this is all from Lucas's point of view, and it's going to be chapter 1, at the very beginning. And the book starts off with the quote, "If you want some lies to be believed, wrap them up in truths," which is a Danish proverb. Yeah. And that is Lucas all over. So this is chapter 1, Sunday. The steady noise from the antique French carriage clock on the mantelpiece had somehow amplified itself, a rhythmic tick-tick, tick-tick, which usually went unnoticed. After I'd been sitting in the same position and holding my ailing mother-in-law's hand for almost an hour, the incessant clicking had long wormed its way deep into my brain, where it grated on my nerves, stirring up fantasies of hammers, bent copper coils, and shattered glass. Nora looked considerably worse than when I'd visited her earlier this week. She was propped up in bed, surrounded by a multitude of pillows. She'd lost more weight, something her pre-illness slender physique couldn't afford. Her bones jutted out like rocks on a cliff, turning a kiss on the cheek into an extreme sport in which you might lose an eye. The ghostly hue on her face resembled the kids who'd come dressed up as ghouls for Halloween a few days ago, emphasizing the dark circles that had transformed her eyes into mini sinkholes. It wasn't clear how much time she had left. I was no medical professional, but we could all tell it wouldn't be long. When she'd shared her doctor's diagnosis with me barely 3 weeks ago, they'd estimated around 2 months. But at the rate of Nora's decline, it wouldn't have come as a surprise if it turned out to be a matter of days. Ovarian cancer. As a 32-year-old Englishman who wasn't yet half Nora's age, I'd had no idea it was dubbed the silent killer, but now understood why. Despite the considerable wealth and social notoriety Nora enjoyed in the upscale and picturesque town of Chelmsford on the outskirts of Boston, by the time she'd seen someone because of a bad back and they'd worked out what was going on, her vital organs were under siege. The disease was a formidable opponent, the stealthiest of snipers, destroying her from the inside out before she had any indication something was wrong. A shame, truly, because Nora was the only one in the Ward family I actually liked. I wouldn't have sat here this long with my arse going numb for my father-in-law's benefit, that's for sure. Given half the chance, I'd have smothered him with a pillow while the nurse wasn't looking. But not Nora. She was kind-hearted, gentle, the type of person who quietly gave time and money to multiple causes and charities without expecting a single accolade in return. Sometimes I imagined my mother would have been like Nora had she survived, and fleetingly wondered what might have become of me if she hadn't died so young, if I'd have grown up to be a good person. I gradually pulled my hand away from Nora's and reached for my phone, decided on playing a game or two of backgammon until she woke up. The app had thrashed me the last 3 rounds, and I was due, but Nora's fingers twitched before I made my first move. I studied her brow, which seemed furrowed in pain even as she slept. Not for the first time, I hoped the Grim Reaper would stake his or her claim sooner rather than later. If I were death, I'd be swift, efficient, and merciful, not prescribe a drawn-out, painful process during which body, mind, or both wasted away. People shouldn't be made to suffer as they died. Not all of them, anyway. Lucas? I jumped as Diane, Nora's nurse, and my neighbour put a hand on my shoulder. She'd only left the room for a couple of minutes, but always wore those soft-soled shoes when she worked, which meant I never heard her coming until she was next to me. Kind of sneaky when I thought about it, and I decided I wouldn't sit with my back to the door again. As she walked past, the air filled with the distinctive medicinal scent of hand sanitizer and antiseptic. I hated that smell. Too many bad memories I couldn't shake. Diane set a glass of water on the bedside table, checked Nora's vitals, and turned around. Hands on hips, she peered down at me from her 6-foot frame, her tight dark curls bouncing alongside her jawbone like a set of tiny corkscrews. You can go home now. I'll take the evening from here. Regardless of her amicable delivery, there was no mistaking the instruction, but she still added, get some rest. God knows you look like you need it. Thanks a lot, I replied with mock indignation. You sure know how to flatter a guy. Diane cocked her head to one side, folded her arms, and gave me another long stare, which to anyone else would have been intimidating. How long since you slept? I mean, properly. I waved a hand. It's only 7 o'clock. Yeah, I guess given the circumstances, I wouldn't want to be home alone either. I looked away. That's not what this is about. I'll wait until Nora wakes up again. I want to say goodbye, in case she... My voice cracked a little on the last word, and I feigned a cough as I pressed the heels of my palms over my eyes. She won't, Diane whispered. Not tonight. Trust me. She's not ready to go. I knew Diane had worked in hospice for 2 decades and had seen more than her fair share of people taking their last breaths. If she said Nora wouldn't die tonight, then Nora would still be here in the morning. I'll leave in a bit, after she wakes up. Diane let out a resigned sigh and sat down in the chair on the opposite side of the bed. A comfortable silence settled between us, despite the fact we didn't know each other very well. I'd first met Diane and her wife, Karina, who were both in their 40s, when they'd struck up a conversation with me and my wife, Michelle, as we'd moved into our house on the other side of Chelmswood almost 3 years prior. Something about garbage days and recycling rules, I think. The mundane discussion could have led to a multitude of drinks, shared meals, and the swapping of embarrassing childhood stories, except we were what Michelle had called busy professionals with, quote, hectic work schedules that make forging new friendships difficult. My captain's subtext translated her comment as can't be bothered, and consequently the 4 of us had never made the transition from neighbours to close friends. Aside from the occasional holiday party invitation or looking after each other's places whenever we were away, picking up the mail, watering the plants, that kind of thing, we only saw each other in passing. Nevertheless, Karina regularly left a welcome back note on our kitchen counter, along with flowers from their garden and a bottle of wine. Not one to be outdone on anything, Michelle reciprocated, except she'd always chosen more elaborate bouquets and fancier booze. My wife's silent little pissing contests, which I'd pretended to be too dense to notice, had irked me to hell and back. But when Nora fell ill and Diane had been assigned as one of her nurses, I'd been relieved it was someone I knew and trusted. I'm sorry this is happening to you, Diane said, rescuing me from the spousal memories. It's not fair. I mean, it's never fair, obviously. But on top of what you're going through with Michelle, I can't imagine. It's so awful. I acknowledged the rest of the words she left hanging in the air with a nod. There was nothing left to say about my wife's situation we hadn't already discussed, rediscussed, dissected, reconstructed, and pulled apart all over again. We'd not solved the mystery of her whereabouts or found more clues. Nothing new, helpful, or hopeful anyway. We never would. Silence descended upon us again, the gaudy carriage clock ticking away, reviving the images of me with hammer in hand, until the doorbell masked the sound. "I'll go," Diane muttered, and before I had the chance to stand, she left the room and pulled the door shut. I couldn't help wondering if her swift departure was because she needed to escape from me, the man who'd used her supportive shoulder almost daily for the past month. I decided to tone it down a little. Nobody wanted to be around an overdramatic, constant crybaby, regardless of their circumstances. I listened for voices, but couldn't hear any, despite my leaning toward the door and craning my neck. I couldn't risk moving in case Nora woke up. Her body was failing, but her mind remained sharp as a box of tacks. She'd wonder what I was up to if she saw my ear pressed against the mahogany panel. Solid mahogany. The best money could buy, thanks to the Ward family's 3 generations-old construction empire. No cheap building materials in this house, as my father-in-law had pointed out when he'd first given me the tour of the 6 bedrooms, 4 reception rooms, indoor and outdoor kitchens, never mind the abhorrent freezing Boston winters, and what could only be described as grounds, because yard implied it was manageable with a push-along mower. "Only the best for my family," Gideon had said in his characteristic rumbly, pompous way as he'd knocked back another glass of Lefroy. The broad East Coast accent he worked hard to hide, making more of a reappearance with each gluttonous glug. "No MDF vinyl or laminate garbage, thank you. That's not what I'm about, not at all." "It's in the houses you build for others," I'd thought, as I'd grunted an inaudible reply he no doubt mistook for agreement, because people rarely contradicted him. As I raised my glass of scotch, I didn't mention the council flats I grew up in on what Gideon dismissed as the lesser side of the pond, or the multiple times Dad and I had been kicked out of our dingy digs because he couldn't pay the rent and we'd ended up on the streets. My childhood had been vastly different to my wife's, and I imagined the pleasure I'd find in watching Gideon's eyes bulge as I described the squalor I'd lived in, and he realised my background was worlds away from the shiny and elitist version I'd led everyone to believe was the truth. I pictured myself laughing as he understood his perfect daughter had married so far beneath her she may as well have pulled me up from the dirt like a carrot, and not the expensive organic kind. Of course, I hadn't told him anything. I'd taken another swig of the scotch I loathed, but otherwise kept my mouth shut. As satisfying as it would have been, my father-in-law knowing the truth about my background had never been part of my long-term agenda. In any case, and despite Gideon's efforts, things were working to plan. Better than. The smug bastard was dead, and he wasn't the only one.
I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. I could listen to you all day.
Oh, well, thank you.
I love listening to you read. And what I like about it, when I listen to an author read an excerpt and then I get that book, that your voice will now be in my head.
Oh, brilliant.
When I'm reading the book. And that's why I love listening to authors read their own work, because it's that connection.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Do you listen to your audiobooks? Are they on audio? Do you listen to
No,
them?
I don't have any audiobooks yet. And I probably won't. If I was making the audio myself, no.
Yes.
I do not like listening to myself on tape. How about you?
No, so I listen to them, but I'm not the narrator of any of them. But I do listen to them. Oh, no, I can't do the accents. Everyone would sound English.
Yeah, that's true. But you have a beautiful voice.
Oh, well, thank you.
Especially when you're reading. Speaking of which, have you written any books that take place in England?
I have. So The Neighbours was my second novel, my first suspense. That one takes place just south of London. And my very first one, Time After Time, is a rom-com that also takes place in London.
Okay, I have a question for you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's always a bit of a British connection because I like, so Lucas, I wanted him to be a Brit because I needed to bring in the slang, and he was just English in my head, and I needed him to be. But generally there's one, could be a secondary character, could be a main character. There's always a bit of a connection, and I generally have one mention of Switzerland, a Swiss something. Could be, I don't know. In one of the books, I said his bowel movements were as timely as a Swiss train or something like that. So there's always something, always a Swiss connection and a British one.
Even down to the bowel movements, we have something of an author in our books. We always put that little something in our books about
just a little something.
Just a little something. But I wanted to ask you, when you have an English character, do you write? Okay, in dialogue, do you write in the accent, or do you just let the reader know before the speech that he's talking English? I noticed some authors will write in the accent, others will not.
Yeah, I don't write in the accent because I find that can be really tedious to read. So I'll use slang, the boot of a car in dialogue. And I remember in one of the characters, one of the proofreaders suggested changing mum, M-U-M, to M-O-M. And I said, no. There are people, I think Birmingham, it's M-O-M. People would say mom instead of mum, but not where this character was from. So I said, no, Stet, it has to be, when he's talking dialogue, it has to be M-U-M. Yeah.
My son was born over here, and he always writes M-U-M. He was born here. But he was raised by me. And when he was old enough to buy his first Mother's Day card, he came home and said they were all spelt wrong.
Oh, that's adorable.
It's the cutest thing. But and even one of my grandkids would say M-U-M.
Yeah.
I like M-U-M.
Me too.
Mum. It's mum.
Mum for my three.
Mum. I have a question I wanted to put up because it got my attention. Now, of course, it's disappeared. Give me 1 second. I do want to find it. Of course, it's gone. I'll try and find it. No, I do want to find it because it just got my attention. Hold on. They were asking. Oh, here it is. How was it writing from a male POV?
So it wasn't the first time. So Her Secret Son, which was book 3, that was exclusively written from a man's point of view. And in The Neighbours, I had one point of view character. There are 4, but there's one, Nate, also a man. So, and then in You Will Remember Me, another guy. So this is my 4th time, whatever, writing from a man's point of view. And I really, really enjoy it. I find that I can be less flowery somehow. I can be almost more direct when I'm writing from a male's point of view. But most of the time I try not to overthink it. And I remember one of my author friends, Asma Zahanat Khan, she said, men and women have the same emotions. We all have the same emotions. We might just express them a little bit differently. So don't overthink it. And I think that was very valid. I really think more about the character than, is it a guy, is it a woman? Of course, if you're writing from a child's point of view, you might express, they wouldn't be so wordy perhaps. But I really enjoy writing from a male's point of view. Or maybe that's just the characters that I enjoy telling their story. I'm not sure, but I love writing.
Lucas is your favorite, and
he's
a fun character to write.
Yeah, he's really so snarky. He's bad.
He really does. Okay, now this book came out in May.
Yes,
and it's on audio.
Yeah,
and Kindle, and it's wide.
Yes, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, and if anyone listens to the audio, here's a fun fact for you. The narrator, Alex Wyndham, who also narrated all of the male point of view characters in my previous books, I love him to bits. He's fantastic. If you've watched the show Yellow Jackets, which was a big hit last year, he plays the American detective Kevin in the present storyline because he's also an actor. But he plays an American in that. He's actually from the UK. but he lives in California. And so there's a little tidbit for you.
Now, is Yellow Jacket a series or is it a movie?
It's a series. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was season 1 last year. And I think season 2, well, it was last year, this year. I think season 2 will start spring 2023, I think. It's about it's really good. It's an elite high school all-female soccer team, and they fly somewhere for a tournament, and the plane crashes, and they're stranded in the woods, in the wilderness, for almost 2 years. And then you have the past timeline and then the present timeline, and really bad stuff has happened in the past, but you only get snippets of it. So it's really, really intriguing.
So he's an actor and also a narrator.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now, what part did he play again in Yellow Jacket?
Kevin, the detective in the present story.
Looking him up. Mm-hmm. No British accent, right?
Oh, well, not in Yellow Jackets. So in Yellow Jackets, he plays an American, but he's originally from the UK. So
he is.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
But he's a whiz at kind of a wunderkind at different accents. I don't know how he does it. American, male, female, old, young, American, German, South African. I mean, English. It's just, it's very talented.
He's a good actor. He can do all those. He's a good actor.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned before we went live that you also have just, will be coming out soon, a rom-com.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. I'd love to. So next year I'll have 2 books coming out. So my usual thriller in May, tentatively called The Revenge List. That one will publish. That one's about an anger management therapy session gone terribly wrong.
Okay.
It's about a woman who writes a forgiveness list in anger management. This is not the rom-com. This is the thriller.
Right.
She writes a list of names, people she could forgive if she chose to, but she doesn't want to forgive any of them because they've all made her angry. And she loses the list, and then people on said list start getting hurt. But the big problem is that she put her own name on the list because her past self is the most difficult person to forgive in her eyes. So now she's in trouble. So that's the thriller for May. And then a complete switch in October. We'll have a rom-com, tentative working title. I think it'll probably change, but it's The Christmas Wager. I imagine it'll change, which is about Bella, a real estate hotshot, who is tasked with acquiring a building in the quaint Colorado mountain town called Maple Falls. And this little building houses a Christmas shop. And she goes to Maple Falls to acquire said building from the owner, but encounters the owner's hunky grandson, Jesse, who says, no, you don't. And so they decide to enter the annual Maple Falls Christmas games. And whoever wins said games will either sell the shop at a very high price or buy it at a very low price. And sparks fly. But will love find them, even though they don't think they'll ever have anything in common?
Sounds good. This is a rom-com. And what name is that under?
That will be under Holly Cassidy, so a completely different name.
How did it feel going back to write a rom-com after 6 books of suspense, thrillers, and murders?
It was really funny. It was really, really fun. And I have a scene with an avalanche, and I thought, oh, no, wait, can't do that. no, not allowed to do that.
Put on the brakes.
Yeah, just, whoa, take a step back. And then there's a scene that happens on, and I can't give too much away, but it happens on a lake and that's frozen, and somebody gets into trouble. Nobody gets hurt, but somebody gets into a bit of trouble. And my editor said, oh, we've got to dial this back a bit. And I said, but no one gets hurt. She said, yeah, but this is a rom-com, Hannah. Oh, yeah, sorry, thriller brain. It was really fun, though. And the thing that kicked that off, really, it was really weird. So I was writing Never Coming Home. And Never Coming Home is my pandemic book, in the sense that It's my third release in COVID times.
Okay.
But it was the book that I wrote exclusively after COVID had started, because the others I'd written before. So Never Coming Home, I started writing it in 2020. We were in lockdown. My mom had passed in Switzerland. I couldn't go and see her to say goodbye. It was just, thank you. It was just absolute rubbish. And so that was another reason why Lucas was so funny to me, because I could escape into this book, Never Coming Home, and have a laugh, which was really what I needed. And I enjoyed having a laugh so much. I thought, oh, it'd be so nice to write something a bit lighter, but how do I do that? How would I do that? Would I write it and then give it to my agent? And if I do and nobody wants it, I'll have wasted my time. Should I? So I ended up doing nothing because it was easier than trying to do something. Right. Inertia. And so funnily enough, afterwards, so I thought about it some more, and I thought, yeah, and I saw some friends coming out, working together on a Christmas book. I thought, oh, that seems like fun, and what would I write about? And then my agent, out of the blue, sends me a note saying, got an appetite to write a Christmas rom-com? And I said, yeah, it is. And that was it. So it was.
Congratulations.
Happened.
Do you think you'll be doing some more rom-coms?
I hope so. The only issue, I mean, I shouldn't really call it an issue. I'm deeply grateful, would be writing 2 books a year. You know, I thought 1 was a fair clip, but two is an even faster clip. So
yeah, that's quite a commitment.
It is, yeah. But I would, if I can do it, I would love to, because I really. The only problem, haha. What I found now that I've written a rom-com and I'm now working on the thriller for 2024, it's got really, really dark.
Oh,
really dark. People die. That's a lot.
Oh no! Well, I can't wait to read them.
Oh, thank you.
But this has been so much fun. You are a joy to talk to.
Oh, likewise.
The books sound fabulous. I do want to talk about the giveaway. We're almost up with our hour, so I'll hand it back to you and let us know what you're giving away.
So we have a copy of Never Coming Home. There it is. And this will be sent to the winner via my publisher, but I will send a self-adhesive book plate and some bookmarks signed as well.
Oh, wonderful. And you've asked if I would pick the winner for you.
Yes, please.
So I would do that tonight before 8 o'clock my time in a couple of hours, and I would tag you. I'm also going to do my regular giveaway, which is a $5 Amazon gift card. Most of you know that how to enter this one, you need to go to my author page and share this video to all your friends, share it to your favorite group, share it to your personal place, and tag me. And that way I know that you shared it, and I will enter you in the drawing for the $5 Amazon gift card. Hannah, this has been such a joy. I had so much fun talking to you.
It's been great. And you know what? Do you know what I think we should do? What? Because I mentioned the audio book so much. Yes. I think I'll kick in an audio copy of that.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we have 1 signed paperback.
Yeah.
The one thing I ask, and I'm going to ask the readers to do this, if you don't do audio, just mention it in the comments.
Yes.
Because I know some people do not like audio, it's just not their preference, or they can't, listen to audio.
That's right.
Just put in the comment, no offense taken, just put no audio. And that way I won't choose you because you can't read audio. And I've learned that the hard way by going through 3 winners one time for another author. Oh. I don't do audio. Now I just ask.
Yeah.
You do audio.
It's not everyone's cup of tea, but for those who enjoy audio, I hope.
We all have our preference. I love physical books. I mean, I'll read ebooks for someone's review. I'm not expecting an author to send me paperbacks to review. That's the only time I will read an ebook.
Oh,
Other than that, yeah, it's physical. I have to read it.
That's so. I don't mind audio. I love because it forces me to get out for a walk, because that's my only.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. For me, I have a hard time. The only time I can listen to audio is in my car. And then I'm finding I'm too busy looking around me at the traffic that I'm losing track of the book. So we all have our preference.
We do.
And I did want to ask you, if you have chance, I know you're busy, but if you have time to go back and look through the comments in the group and author page, any questions that we didn't get to that you want to answer,
sure.
I'd love you to. But this has been fantastic. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to talk to our readers, and then I'll call it a night.
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for watching. This has been great. I will go back to the comments and I'll answer as many questions as I possibly can. And you know, if you like my stuff and want to connect, come and find me at Hannah Mary McKinnon on Facebook or Instagram, or Hannah M McKinnon on Twitter. I love hearing from readers, so I hope to see you there.
Love it. And if you want to come back when the next book's out,
yeah, let's do it.
Let's hook up and get you on the calendar.
That's great. That'd be lovely, Tina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. And I will be announcing the winners before 8 o'clock this evening. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Hannah. Good night, everybody.